faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books worldwide.
Hello, this is Sally's Book Club.
Today's book is City of Fortune, with the subtitle Venice's Maritime Hegemony. It's the third volume in the Mediterranean epic trilogy by British historian Roger Crowley. Venice, Italy, is renowned as a historic cultural city and global tourist destination, but it was once the wealthiest nation in the Western world and Mediterranean maritime hegemon. Despite its small land area and lack of natural resources, this tiny maritime nation gradually built a vast overseas colonial system. Through maritime trade, Venice became a centuries-long world trade center. City of Fortune reveals how this commercial miracle emerged, chronicling Venice's rise, maritime dominance, and eventual decline. Spanning 1000 to 1500 AD, the 21-chapter, 340,000-word book vividly depicts how Venice forged its maritime empire through naval strength, cunning diplomacy, and shrewd commerce. Ooh. The book was named Book of the Year by the UK's Sunday Telegraph and recommended by publications like the Financial Times. I'll now explore the book's key insights through 4 sections. First, Venice's rise. Second, maritime rivalry with Genoa. Third, establishing maritime empire. Fourth, the empire's decline. Let's begin with part 1. The rise of Venice. The Adriatic Sea, between Italy and the Balkan Peninsula, is a major Mediterranean gulf. Stretching 800 kilometers long and 160 kilometers wide, it's historically connected Europe with the eastern Mediterranean. Merchant ships from the Baltic, Black Sea, Arabia, India, and Far East traversed it, making it a global trade gateway. Venice lies at the Adriatic's northern tip, comprising scattered islands surrounded by lagoons. Lakes formed when sandbars seal off bays. Lagoons form when sediment deposits create sandbars that separate bays from the sea. With shallow waters, ships must follow designated channels to avoid grounding. The Venetians installed wooden stakes in the lagoon marking navigable channels, removing them when enemies invaded. This prevented enemies from navigating the maze-like waterways to reach Venice. Thus, the lagoon served as a natural barrier against foreign invasions. East of Venice lies the Lido, a chain of narrow sandbar islands running north-south. Ships leaving the Lido transition from lagoon to open sea. Venice's land was extremely barren, producing almost nothing. No grain, timber, minerals, nor even fresh water. All daily necessities had to be imported by sea. Any famine would bring catastrophic disaster to the entire city. These harsh conditions forged a spirit of unity among Venetians. Whether nobles or commoners, all contributed their utmost during crises to overcome difficulties together. For Venice, its sole advantage was geographical location, attracting massive annual goods flow. Goods traversed the Adriatic Sea to Venice before being resold to inland Europe. Thus, Venice's rise depended entirely on developing maritime trade. Early Venice was merely a fishing village where locals survived through fishing and salt production. From the 5th century AD, inland Europeans migrated here to escape warfare. As population grew, Venice established a republic in 687 AD, leveraging its prime location to build trade relations worldwide. By the 10th century, Venetian commerce had taken shape. Russian sable furs, Syrian textiles, and Constantinople silks were all available here. 2 major events during this period significantly propelled Venice's rise. First, eliminating pirates and gaining Adriatic naval control. Venetian merchants constantly suffered from coastal pirates who ambushed ships for survival. By 1000 AD, Doge Pietro Orsillo II resolved to solve this permanently. He assembled a powerful fleet and attacked the pirate stronghold at Narenta.
After fierce combat, Venetians completely destroyed the pirate nest.
With Narenta's pirates eradicated, no maritime force in the Adriatic could rival Venice. He secured Venice's prosperity for centuries to come. The second major event was signing the Golden Bull with the Byzantine Empire. By the late 11th century, the once glorious Mediterranean power had begun to decline. The Byzantine Empire was declining and facing military threats from the Normans. In the 80s, Venetians defeated the Norman army in the Adriatic Sea, protecting Byzantine safety. In return, the Byzantine emperor signed the Golden Bull with Venice in 1082. He authorized Venetian merchants to conduct free trade in his territories without paying taxes. Constantinople, the Byzantine capital, was the Mediterranean trade hub and Venice's most crucial trading partner. The treaty allowed Venetian merchants to trade not just in Constantinople, but also in key cities and ports like Modon, Corinth, and Athens. These served as vital maritime supply stations for merchant ships. The Golden Bull became Venice's key to unlocking Eastern trade treasures. After securing naval dominance and signing the Golden Bull, Venice's maritime trade boomed, creating numerous wealthy merchants. By the late 12th century, Venice had become a Mediterranean maritime and commercial powerhouse. Then came an event that changed Venice's destiny: the Fourth Crusade. Since the late 11th century, European Christians had launched multiple crusades against Muslim advances, and the Fourth Crusade was now being prepared.
The campaign planned to mobilize 33,000 men targeting Egypt, but European knights faced a problem. Byzantium denied passage through its territory. With land routes blocked, they needed ships, but where to find enough?
So they sought help from the maritime power, Venice. Venetians cared little about defending Christianity or holy wars. They were interested in what profits the crusade could bring them. Venice's doge at the time was Enrico Dandolo, over 90 and blind, yet remarkably sharp and insightful. Dandolo keenly recognized this as a rare business opportunity. Capturing Egypt would bring Venice not only massive wealth, but also trade dominance in the region. So Dandolo decided to make a high-stakes gamble. He proposed that Venice would build a fleet of 500 ships to transport the Crusaders to the eastern Mediterranean coast, providing 9 months' provisions for all personnel and horses in return. Venice demanded 85,000 marks and half of all spoils. This became known as the famous Treaty of Venice. Crusader representatives readily signed the treaty, delighting both parties. Little did they know, this treaty's chain reaction would make the Fourth Crusade one of Christianity's most controversial events. Soon after signing, the Crusaders faced embarrassment. Despite scraping funds together, they still owed Venice 34,000 marks. As Crusader leaders despaired, Dandolo offered a solution. If they captured Zara, an Adriatic coastal city, their debt payment could be deferred. Zara had been Venetian territory but recently defected to Hungary. Resenting this, Venice pressured the leaders into accepting this excessive demand.
Thus, Venice used Crusader forces to reclaim Zara, deviating from the Crusade's purpose from the outset.
Worse followed. Though temporarily relieved from payment, the 34,000 mark debt remained unresolved. Then an unexpected event completely altered the Crusade's fate. A Byzantine prince named Alexios Angelos approached them. His father overthrown in a coup, he begged their help to reclaim the throne, promising payment upon success. 200,000 marks. The shrewd Dandolo seized this opportunity. He championed the proposal, and despite its blatant hypocrisy, other leaders agreed, tempted by wealth. The crusade now strayed further. Crusaders helped Alexios capture Constantinople, but he was killed in a new uprising before securing his rule. The new ruler refused to pay the Crusaders, abandoning their holy mission. The Crusaders sacked Constantinople again in a frenzy of slaughter and plunder. Thus, driven by profit, this crusade became Christians sacking a Christian city, reducing prosperous Constantinople to ruins. After the war, Crusaders returned home with exquisite spoils. But Venice reaped the richest rewards. Besides treasures, it seized Byzantine bases and islands like Corfu and Gallipoli. These served as transit stations supplying passing ships. Venetians had long coveted them. Controlling these meant dominating eastern Mediterranean trade. Thereafter, Venice acquired other strategic ports and islands through purchase and force. These combined with territories partitioned from Byzantium formed Venice's overseas colonial system. Venetians called these dominions a maritime empire. Three key bases anchored this system. First, Medan and Corinth in southern Greece, twin ports 32 kilometers apart, with arsenals, shipyards, and warehouses. As the gateway to the eastern Mediterranean, Medan and Corinth were Venice's lifeline, earning the title Eyes of the Republic. Sailing south from Medan and Corinth led to the second vital base. Crete sat at the crossroads of two trade routes, to Constantinople, Black Sea, and to Syrian-Egyptian spice markets. Beyond supplying merchant ships, Crete served another critical role. During war, it provided naval logistical support in the Aegean. East from Medan and Corinth, rounding Peloponnese north into the Aegean, lay the third key base, Negroponte, a crucial way station for merchant fleets bound for Constantinople. Amidst Mediterranean colonies, these three bases formed the empire's strategic axis. Losing them risked collapse. Venetians fought desperately to defend them. Ironically, the Fourth Crusade, launched to halt Islamic expansion, catapulted Venice into a mighty colonial empire. Dandolo undoubtedly laid Venice's maritime hegemony, but its rise faced challenges from another Mediterranean power, leading to a deadly struggle for dominance. This brings us to part 2 of our discussion, Venice and Genoa's maritime rivalry. Genoa lies symmetrically opposite Venice on Italy's west coast, also serving as a sea-to-land transit hub. Like Venice, Genoa aimed to monopolize Mediterranean trade routes and become maritime hegemon. Genoese mastered navigation and maritime trade earlier than Venetians. They shared Venetian traits: resilience, adventurousness, and profit-driven pragmatism. Columbus, discoverer of the New World, was a Genoese navigator. Their key difference lay in political temperament. Some said Genoese were donkeys scattering when struck, while Venetians were pigs huddling together when attacked. Venice's harsher survival conditions fostered stronger unity. Genoa's individualism bred frequent infighting, violent conflicts, and intense political struggles. This divergence shaped their destinies. Venice's windfall from the Fourth Crusade made it the Mediterranean's premier trading power, overshadowing Genoa and fueling Genoese envy. For over 150 years, these maritime powers competed comprehensively in commerce, diplomacy, and military affairs. Tensions ran so high that minor incidents could spark wars. 4 devastating wars erupted during this period. Their first war began in Acre, Syria's commercial hub, where Venetian and Genoese merchants traded with Islamic states, bringing Venice near destruction. In 1250, a Genoese sailor's death during clashes with Venetians ignited the war. Severe riots erupted in Acre. Venetians and Genoese attacked each other's compounds, massacring residents as conflicts escalated into open warfare. In 1257, June saw Venetian and Genoese fleets converge at Acre, where hundreds of warships clashed in fierce combat. Ultimately, the Venetian navy triumphed, capturing 25 warships and killing over 1,700 Genoese.
Genoese were expelled from Acre. After this defeat, they naturally sought revenge and soon counterattacked.
This time, Genoa targeted eastern Mediterranean trade bases. After the Fourth Crusade, Byzantium was weakened. Venice dominated Constantinople's trade, controlling the emperor. In 1260, Genoese found the Byzantine exiled emperor. Michael Palaiologos proposed Genoa sending a fleet to help him reclaim the throne. The condition: Genoa would replace Venice in gaining Constantinople's trade privileges. Michael Palaiologos readily agreed, sealing their pact. In July 1261, Genoese suddenly attacked Constantinople, catching Venetians off guard. The coup succeeded almost effortlessly. Venetians were expelled from Constantinople but soon allowed back to resume business. This exemplified classic Byzantine diplomacy. They never granted Constantinople's trade monopoly to one party, instead pitting rivals against each other to maintain balance. Thus, neither Venice nor Genoa gained significant advantage this time. In 1291, the Islamic Mamluk Sultanate captured a crucial Christian stronghold. The Acre incident triggered their second war, and The Maluks were vital trade partners for both nations. Eastern spices and silks passed through Muslim intermediaries. After Acre's fall, the Pope banned Christian states from trading with Maluks, necessitating new routes bypassing Muslim territories. Thus, the Black Sea became the trade axis between Europe and the East, intensifying Venetian-Genoese commercial rivalry. In 1298, competing for Black Sea monopoly, their fleets clashed near Korčula in the Adriatic, 170 warships in brutal combat. This time, Genoa won decisively, but didn't expel Venetians from the Black Sea, where competition continued. In 1350, the Genoese fleet blockaded the Bosporus Strait, the vital passage from Mediterranean to Black Sea, to prevent Venetian entry. Thus began their Third War. This war featured two naval battles. First, in 1352, Venice allied with Byzantium and Catalonia to form a combined fleet that clashed with Genoa in the Bosporus Strait. With the strait only 1.6 kilometers wide and stormy conditions, neither side could maintain formations. Their chaotic brawl left both crippled. Yet Genoa rapidly rebuilt its fleet. In 1354, they fought Venetians again at Porto Longo on the Peloponnese Peninsula. This time, Venice suffered devastating defeat, losing 6,000 men. Its naval elite was decimated. After this battle, Genoa gained dominance over Black Sea trade. By the late 14th century, Venice and Genoa headed toward another major conflict, their Fourth War, which would prove decisive. A life or death struggle for both nations, historically called the War of Chioggia. The war ignited over control of Byzantium, specifically a tiny Aegean island called Tenedos. In 1376, Venice seized it through coercion. Tenedos commanded the route to Constantinople and Black Sea. Venice aimed to strangle Genoa's maritime traffic. Genoa wouldn't yield. War erupted in 1378, fueled by Venetian wealth and power. Beyond Genoa, neighbors Padua and Hungary also feared and resented Venice. Thus, these three formed an alliance to besiege Venice by land and sea, placing Venice at severe disadvantage. Initially, Venetians gained the upper hand. In May 1378, the Venetian fleet crushed Genoa at Anzio, but the tide soon turned against them. On land, Hungarian Paduan forces severed Venice's supply lines. At sea, Genoa assembled a new fleet. In May 1379, they defeated Venice's navy, occupying a southern port city. By 1380, Chioggia is a port within the lagoon, just 25 kilometers from Venice's central St. Mark's Square. Now, at life or death stakes, despair ignited massive patriotic fervor among Venetians. They vowed, as long as one man remains to row a galley and wield a weapon, our nation shall endure. The entire city mobilized. The arsenal worked day and night, repairing warships. Volunteers enlisted faster than clerks could record names. Venetians counterattacked, scuttling ships to blockade Chioggia's 3 outlets, trapping Genoese inside and severing supply lines. Starving Genoese resorted to eating rats, cats, crabs, and seaweed before surrendering unconditionally. Post-battle, both nations diverged. Defeat's humiliation triggered violent political turmoil in Genoa. 5 years saw 10 doges replaced, before Genoa submitted to France, ending its rivalry with Venice. After defeating its rival, Venice swiftly recovered, ascending to imperial supremacy. Next, Part 3. Achieving Maritime Empire Dominance. Venice's hegemony rested on 2 pillars: a Mediterranean-wide colonial system and a unique overseas trade model. First, the colonial system. Post-1380, Venice underwent half a century of vigorous expansion. Eastern Mediterranean then fragmented among Hungary, Genoa, Pisa, Florence, Naples, and others. Adventurers and pirates also controlled chains of islands, ports, and fortresses. Venice's core political philosophy: minimal cost, acquiring valuable lands from states and private lords through flexible diplomacy, financial inducements, and calibrated threats. For example, persuading cash-strapped lords to sell overseas estates for immediate payment. Other cases involved bribing officials or manipulating local factions to gain territory. For uncooperative private adventurers or pirates, Venice would dispatch fleets to threaten their departure. Due to Venice's wealth and power, many cities voluntarily sought inclusion. For most nations, this would be an unexpected windfall, but the Venetians thought differently. Their colonial expansion followed corporate acquisition logic, conducting meticulous cost-benefit analyses for each target. For example, does the city have safe harbors, sufficient farmland and water sources? How robust are its defenses? Are the people compliant? Venetians focused solely on wealth-generating lands, accepting only valuable territories. Catero applied 6 times before joining Venice. Patras required 7 attempts. Like corporate acquisitions, Venetian expansion timed opportunities strategically. In 1488, Hungary offered Dalmatia, renowned for shipbuilding and skilled sailors, but Venice declined. The next year, rebellion erupted there. Venice bought it for 1/3 the original price. Attica in inland Greece also offered submission. Shrewd Venetian senators deemed it barren land without ports, requiring management resources for guaranteed losses, thus rejected. Through gradual territorial accumulation, the maritime empire expanded step by step. While the empire's borders grew, managing numerous colonies posed significant challenges. Let's examine Venice's colonial management, a rigid hierarchy where each rank had distinct salaries, privileges, and responsibilities. For Crete, the largest colony, Venice appointed a duke to govern. This was the system's highest rank. Corfu and Negroponte were overseen by a single rector. Punt was governed by a rector, Modane and Coron ports by a podestar. Smaller territories were managed by mayors and castellans. Beneath these administrators were layered bureaucrats, counselors, treasurers, scribes, and judges. With zero tolerance for corruption, Venice established detailed legal statutes to regulate local officials. For instance, strict regulations governed the number of local governors, accompanying officials, servants, and horses. These officials were prohibited from commercial activities and accepting valuable gifts. No official could act alone. Opening the treasury required consent from 3 financial officers. Senior colonial officials rotated every 2 years to prevent local corruption. Additionally, Venetian inspectors periodically investigated colonies, empowered to arrest guilty officials and forcibly return them for trial. Bribing inspectors was extremely difficult. So, inspectors faced challenges too, as they were themselves subject to oversight. They typically operated in trios, forbidden from trade, accepting gifts, or even living alone. Convicted offenders faced severe punishment as deterrent. Colonial official Boglione had his right hand severed for embezzling state funds. He was then hanged over the very treasury he stole from. Another man, Bianco, had his tongue cut out and was exiled indefinitely for defaming the state. Venetian justice was harsh but impartial, applied equally to dukes and blacksmiths. When colonial misconduct was discovered, Venice acted with lightning speed. In 1447, the Senate received secret reports that Crete's duke colluded with mercenary captains and took bribes. Their response was swift and decisive. They dispatched a trusted captain to Crete to lure the duke aboard a ship under false pretenses, then transported him to Venice for interrogation. Should the duke refuse, pre-written orders authorized the local naval commander to arrest him by force. The operation took just 45 days, a record speed for the era. Through detailed statutes, constant oversight, and forceful enforcement, Venice micromanaged its vast overseas colonies. These colonies supplied Venice with grain, wine, cotton, and more, crucially serving as naval bases, merchant ports, and cargo warehouses. Having covered Venice's colonial system, let's examine its overseas trade methods. From the early 14th century, Venice pioneered a unique overseas trade model. Unlike other nations, Venice strictly controlled shipbuilding, usage, and shipping through state-organized collectives. Venice was then the world's only nation where government policy fully aligned with economic objectives. Effectively, Venice operated as a joint stock enterprise. Its commercial galleys were state property built in the arsenal. By 1500, Venice's arsenal spanned 240,000 square meters, then the world's largest industrial complex. Its infrastructure was medieval Europe's most advanced. When war came, it produced armed galleys at unmatched speed and quality. Venetians knew any vessel defect could bring catastrophic consequences. Thus, quality control was rigorous. Every production stage monitored, each product marked for traceability. Craftsmen were accountable. Stitchers for seam failures, carpenters for mast breakages, substandard work meant dismissal. State-built galleys were auctioned annually to private operators, but voyages remained government-controlled. Captains were state employees. Crew size, wages, cargo rates, schedules, ports, and layovers followed strict regulations.
Violations incurred severe legal penalties.
This ensured both state and citizens profited from commerce, while enabling centralized coordination of national trade. Through experience, Venetians mastered global supply-demand patterns. Venice's entire trade system operated on these principles. Take Indian spices. Each September post-monsoon, ships departed India laden with spices, crossing the Arabian Peninsula to reach Alexandria or Beirut markets by October. Venetian galleys sailed for Alexandria in late August or early September, timing precisely controlled by the Senate. Arriving a month later, they met Eastern goods just reaching port. Ships typically docked 20 days, strictly enforced per Senate mandate. After transactions, ships returned to Venice by mid-December. Beirut-bound vessels followed identical patterns. Each winter, German merchants came to Venice to procure goods. Venetians then sold spices to Germans, reaping substantial profits. Every shipping route followed set patterns called muda, periodic voyages, strictly controlled by the Senate to synchronize returning fleets with trade cycles. This system resembled interlocking gears in a vast machine, linking Eastern goods to European consumers. With reliable availability, Venice became merchants' preferred choice. When muda fleets reached Venice, goods went to the Rialto for trading. The Rialto was both Venice's commercial core and the world's trade axis. People called it the wealthiest place on earth. It featured docks for bulk goods like oil, coal, iron, warehouses for flour, timber, and diverse commodities, carpets, silk, ginger, glass, etc. Everything seemed available, even Egyptian mummies ground into medicinal powder. Contemporaries marveled at Venice's global reach. Merchants worldwide thronged the Rialto, busily trading. Indian pepper shipped to England, Russian furs sold in Cairo, Syrian cotton reached German citizens. Chinese silk adorned Italian nobles. Profits soared, 80% on cotton, 60% on spices. The state taxed every import or export, amassing enormous wealth. With vast colonies and unique trade models, Venice monopolized Eastern Mediterranean maritime trade in the 15th century. Just as Venetian maritime hegemony peaked, crisis approached. Introducing Part 4. The decline of the Maritime Empire.
From the late 13th century, the Anatolian Ottomans rose rapidly, a martial Muslim people expanding relentlessly.
By the early 15th century, the Ottoman Empire expanded to the edges of Venice's maritime empire, alarming Venetians with this burgeoning power. They feared this territorially ambitious state would eventually challenge their maritime dominance. Well, I know that in 1453, Ottoman forces led by Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople.
Venetians felt the threat was now imminent.
Sure enough, the Ottomans soon targeted Venice. Colonies fell successively, especially when Ottomans captured Negroponte in 1470. As one of Venice's 3 vital overseas bases, Negroponte's fall signaled the empire's irreversible decline. Venice lost more territories as Ottoman expansion terrified Christendom.
In 1480, an Ottoman army invaded Italy, advancing within 500 kilometers of Rome.
But Mehmed II suddenly died. Ottomans withdrew, relieving the Western world. For over a decade, Mediterranean peace prevailed as Sultan Bayezid II maintained cordial relations with Christian Europe. So for me, Venice seized this respite for trade. Though the new sultan wasn't pacifist, Mehmed's wars had drained Ottoman coffers and exhausted armies, forcing Bayezid to recuperate. And by 1499, replenished Ottomans' reunited war. That June, Ottoman navy advanced on strategic Lepanto. Venetian fleet engaged reluctantly. At Zonio Gulf, outmatched Venetians suffered naval defeat. The outcome proved catastrophic for Venice. Using Lepanto as base, Ottomans seized Modon and Corinth ports. These ports, transit hubs for all Venetian Mediterranean shipping, were called the Eyes of the Republic. If Negroponte's loss began the empire's decline, Modon and Corinth's fall ended Venetian maritime supremacy. Thereafter, Venetian ships lowered flags before Ottoman vessels, acknowledging vassal status. 1499 was destined to be an unfortunate year in Venetian history. Beyond the Battle of Zonchio, another event worsened Venice's plight. That September, Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama returned to Europe from India via the Cape of Good Hope, establishing a direct trade route from India to Lisbon. Previously, Indian spices traversed Syrian and Mamluk territories, passing through multiple checkpoints with heavy tariffs before reaching Venice. The new route bypassed numerous intermediaries. Thus, the spice price advantage became undeniable, signaling obsolescence not just for Venice but the entire Mediterranean trade network. From the early 16th century, European merchants flocked to Lisbon for goods, and the Muda routes gradually declined. Venetians then realized the naval supremacy they bled for no longer mattered. They shifted focus landward. Fewer youths chose seafaring. Wealthy merchants invested in real estate. The once glorious maritime empire was gone forever. Here concludes our coverage of City of Fortune. What global impact did the Venetian Republic's history have? It can be summarized in two key aspects. First, it greatly propelled global trade prosperity. Beyond supplying goods, it facilitated east-west exchanges in craftsmanship, technology, and culture. Venetian merchants introduced glassmaking, soap production, and sugar refining techniques from the East to Europe. Second, the Venetian Maritime Empire was Europe's first comprehensive colonial venture. Venice developed a successful colonial management model, pioneering how small nations could dominate through naval supremacy. This set the example for later Dutch and British ascendancy. Well, that concludes our interpretation of City of Fortune, Venice's maritime hegemony. Reading notes are below the audio. Until next time,